In this video, we're going to learn how to compute materials variances. We're going to use the same standard cost card as I used in the standard costing video. Right now, we're just going to concentrate on the direct materials line because we're computing direct materials variances. So remember, the standard cost card is the standard for 1 unit of product. So for 1 unit of product, you need 2 yards of material. That material costs $1.80 per yard. So the standard cost of materials for 1 unit of product is $3.60. You're going to use that throughout the year to cost your cost of finished goods and your cost of goods sold. Now, at the end of the year, you're going to have these actual results, and you're going to want to know how well you did in terms of materials usage. This example assumes the same amount of material purchased and used. We'll do another example where there's a different amount of materials purchased and materials used. So right now we're going to concentrate on these 3 results right over here. The actual number of units produced, the actual yards of materials used, and the actual cost of materials used. So you notice down here, I put down the goalpost. This is going to help you construct your variance analysis. To construct your variance analysis, on the left-hand side, you're going to put your actual cost of materials. On the right-hand side, you're going to put your standard cost of materials. So you're going to remember that in alphabetical order, actual goes on the left and standard goes on the right. So how do you calculate your actual cost? Your actual cost is your actual quantity multiplied by your actual price. How do you calculate your standard cost? Your standard cost is the standard quantity multiplied by the standard price. You're going to see in this example that the only number that is not given is going to be the standard quantity of materials. Every other number is going to be given. So the difference between your total actual cost and your total standard cost is your total variance. Now you want to break up your total variance into a price variance and a quantity variance. So once again, remember in alphabetical order, price and quantity. For labor and overhead, they're called different things. Don't worry about it. Just remember P and Q, price and quantity, in alphabetical order. Now, all we're going to do is we're going to calculate that middle prong and then start filling in numbers. So you're going to notice that between the left prong and this middle prong right over here, we want to calculate a price variance. Think of what price variance means. Variance means change. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the price and not change the quantity between the left and the middle prong. So notice the left prong has actual quantity. We're told to vary the price, not the quantity. So we'll keep the actual quantity. But now we're going to vary the price. We have a choice between an actual price and a standard price. So by varying it, we're going to change it from actual to standard price. Now we have our middle prong, which is going to be the actual quantity multiplied by the standard price. So notice between the left and the middle prong, actual quantity and actual quantity are the same, but actual price and standard price vary. So the difference between the left and the middle prong measures your price variance. Notice that between the middle prong and the right-hand prong, the standard price and the standard price are the same, so the price doesn't vary, but notice actual quantity and standard quantity do vary. So the difference between the middle and the right-hand prong measure a quantity variance. And in this model, your price plus your quantity variance is going to equal your total variance. So if we want, we can calculate the actual price of the materials used, but it's not necessary. The total cost of the material used is given to us, and let me tell you something, you have a very bad accounting system if at the end of the year you don't know how many materials you used. So all we have to do is drop in the $44,100 that our accounting system has given to us as the total cost, actual cost of the materials used. Now let's try to calculate that middle prong. So we're going to notice that over here, the middle prong, the actual quantity of material used is given to us. We're told that we used 25,200 yards of material, and we also know the standard price. The standard price comes from the standard cost card, and it's $1.80. So to calculate the middle prong, I would take 25,200 yards used and multiply it by the standard price of $1.80 from the standard cost card. So my middle prong is very, very easy to calculate as 25,200 times $1.80, 45,360. Now we have to calculate the right-hand prong. So to calculate the right-hand prong, notice we know the standard price as $1.80. The only thing we do not know is the standard quantity. So now let's go over here and let's see how we calculate that standard quantity of materials used. So we're going to go to the standard cost card. And we notice from the standard cost card that our standard for materials is 2 yards for 1 unit of output. Well, looking at our actuals, we actually produced 12,000 units. So the standard quantity becomes the amount of materials that you would budget given the standard cost card for 12,000 units. So in this case, it would be 12,000 actual units produced multiplied by the 2 yards standard per unit. So if we take the 12,000 actual units produced and multiply it by the 2 yard standard per unit, we get a standard quantity of 24,000 yards. So that becomes our standard quantity. So on our standard quantity, 24,000 yards multiplied by our standard price of $1.80, our total standard cost, $43,200. Now let's calculate our total variance, and then our price variance and our quantity variance. Our total variance becomes the difference between the standard cost and the actual cost. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my standard cost and subtract my actual cost. Now remember, your standard is your budget. You always hope that you come in under budget. So if I take the standard cost of $43,200 and subtract the actual cost of $44,100, I get a negative number. That means that I came in actually over budget. My actual was over budget, and we all know that when you go over budget, that is a bad thing. So I'm going to take the 43,200, subtract the 44,100 actual, and I get a total variance of $900. And because that is negative, that becomes an unfavorable variance. That means that I spent more on materials than my plan. My plan calls for 43,200 of materials, and I actually spent 44,100 on materials. Now, let's see where the problem is. Do we have a price variance problem, or do we have a quantity variance problem? So now, first, let's calculate our price variance. So our price variance is the difference between the middle prong and the left-hand prong. So I'm going to take 45,360 and subtract 44,100, letting the computer calculate that. 45,360, subtract 44,100, I get a price variance of 1,260. Notice that that number is positive. Whenever you compare any two numbers, the one on the right is your budget, the one on the left is your actual. So in this case, our plan was 45,360, and we came in at 44,100. So in terms of price, this is a favorable price variance. Now, let's calculate our quantity variance. So our quantity variance is going to be the difference between the right-hand prong and the middle prong. So I'm going to take the 43,200 and I'm going to subtract the 45,360. And notice I get a quantity variance of negative 2,160. So again, whenever we compare two numbers, the one on the right is budget, the one on the left is actual. So we budgeted for 43,200, and in this case, in terms of quantity, actual 45,360, we have a negative number, so our quantity variance is actually unfavorable. Now I want you to notice that the 1,260 positive price variance subtract the negative 2,160 quantity variance equals the total variance of 900 unfavorable. So let's think about in English terms, not in numbers, but let's think about what this actually means. First of all, the total unfavorable quantity variance just means that you spent more than you expected. Now, by breaking it up into price and quantity, we can actually see where the problem happens. So the favorable price variance means that you paid less per yard than you expected. The unfavorable quantity variance means that you used more material than you expected. And the overall unfavorable variance once again means that the favorable price variance didn't compensate for the unfavorable quantity variance. So let's start into why we might use more materials than expected. It could be that our employees are stealing some materials. That happens in almost any business. It also could be that our employees are poorly trained, they're making lots of mistakes, and they're wasting materials in the production. Notice with the favorable price variance, that means that we paid less per yard than expected. So looking at these two together, it's possible that because we paid less per yard than expected, we got a very low quality of material and had a very high level of waste. And we can see from the total variance that that didn't do us any favors. That was not a good decision to make. Overall, it cost us money. So now we can see how calculating these variances can help us hone into our individual problems.